If you've ever felt that your accent holds you back, struggled to translate your message to your audiences, or felt misunderstood despite your knowledge, if you felt the pain of being passed over, missing out on deals, and just not connecting the way you feel you should, this video is for you. I've been there, and several of my friends and clients have been there too. In fact, I'm going to share 3 stories from people I've worked with on their communication skills and the successes they were able to make with just a few interactions with me, the process we undertook to solve those issues, and what the final results were. I must also mention that this video will be particularly useful to you if you're a newcomer to a place, whether you are a newcomer to a new place of work or a newcomer to a new country where you're having to get used to how things are done differently to where you're coming from. If we haven't met before, my name is Ara, and I make the complex simple because life doesn't have to be that hard. We're going to talk about 3 people I've worked with in the past, and I've put them on the screen here. Now, these aren't their real pictures, and those aren't their real names, just because I want to protect my client confidentiality. However, what I'm showing you here is 3 people, 3 different stories, and all to do with communication and public speaking, and how I was able to help them. We'll start with Kevin, who is a PhD student, Obed, who is a musician's musician, and Gabriel, who is a realtor. The 3 of them have all faced different challenges when it comes to public speaking and getting their message across to people when it matters most. Some maybe had more of an idea of what the issues were than the others, but I was able to help all of them, first of all, diagnose the issues that they were dealing with, also help them see what other issues there might have been and what issues were non-issues actually, and where they need to put their time and focus in order to be able to make a difference and just put their message out in a way that people can really receive it. If that sounds good, keep watching. Okay, great. First up, let's talk about Kevin. Kevin is a young guy. He's in his early 20s, but he got an amazing opportunity to go study in the US. He's Nigerian, but moved to the US to do his PhD and to work as a graduate research assistant. He came to me because he realized that he was starting to have fear when it came to speaking with people. When I asked him why, to dig deeper, he mentioned that every time he speaks to people, it seems like nobody understands him. Each time, they keep asking him to repeat himself or slow down the pace of his speaking because of his accent. Over time, it has turned this really bubbly young fella into somebody who's a bit more withdrawn, a bit more cautious when speaking with people. And that's not helpful because as part of his role in his PhD, he's going to have to do a lot of presentations. He's going to have to speak to people of different ages and people who understand his topic in varying levels. And as a result, he's going to have to speak. And so he's been trying to rack his brain about how he's going to be able to manage this. In that, there were other things he noticed as well. He also noticed that when he speaks, his voice is a bit shaky, again, because of the fear that has come as a result of people always asking him to repeat himself. And he feels like maybe his accent is his problem. In digging deeper, I actually found out a few more things. There were a few things that he needed to work on, but I didn't think his accent was the main issue. And many times, it is possible for us to focus on the wrong thing, fixate on the wrong thing, and not fix the actual issue. For him, there were a few things that may be linked to his accent, but not quite. His pronunciation. So there were some words that for some reason he didn't quite pronounce properly. One of the ways he mispronounced words was simply by dropping consonants, which wasn't necessarily an accent thing. It was just the way he spoke. And so I also found out that he spoke quite quickly, particularly when he was nervous, which then meant that it was hard to understand what he was saying. And so I do understand the comment people were giving him to slow down, but it wasn't because of his accent. It was just the quirks of the way he spoke. However, those are things that once we identified, we were able to fix. He spoke very technically, which then meant that he alienated most of the people he had to speak to and tell about his amazing research topic. And so we had to work on a way to improve the way he communicated the ideas he wanted to communicate in ways that were relatable to the people he was trying to communicate with. So the way he would speak to a 10-year-old, for example, may differ to how he would speak to an adult. But both audiences required for him to make his content more accessible. explain it in terms that they would understand. So we worked on that. In terms of his pronunciation, he had a few things that were linked to his country of origin. Things like having an H factor, so putting H before vowels where they don't exist, and then removing H's where they exist. With words that have TH in there, he often replaced the TH in his pronunciation with a T or a D. So I made him aware of those so that he could work consciously at correcting those. Then in terms of his cadence and pace of speaking, what I did tell him is the way he speaks in a very stuttered way. So what that meant was he would pause almost after every 2 words, which didn't make his speech seem fluid. Again, I made him conscious of it. A lot of the issue is just being conscious of what the issues are and then being told what to do to fix them and continually working on it. I keep telling him, practice makes progress. We're not looking for perfection. We're looking for going in the right direction. So with him, we worked on that as well. And success, let me tell you what he last told me. So he said he had a presentation just the other day, and in it, he was surprised that he didn't have the fear anymore. And this was after a few sessions of practice between us and also him practicing on his own. He reduced the number of filler words he used because he was more familiar with how he wanted to introduce himself. He found that he wasn't as afraid or didn't face as much anxiety when he had to do any public speaking, whether one-on-one or to a group. And that was because he could see himself improving. But best of all was the fact that in his last presentation, there was only one time when he was asked to repeat himself. Other times he would be asked to repeat himself maybe like 10 times in the conversation. Whereas this time it only happened once. So for him, that was a lot of progress. And he was so excited when we spoke. We've still got some way to go. We've still got some more practice to do, but he's making progress. And from him, what I learned is that sometimes we just need to be shown what it is we're not quite doing right, and then we can adjust appropriately. That was a huge win for him. And when it came to his message and how he communicated it, I actually leveraged AI for this because sometimes it's still hard to know how to change the way you speak or the words you use when you speak just to make it match an audience. His research is something to do with machine learning and hydrogen. And he was using very, very fancy words and technical words in that field. So what I told him to do was to say it as he would normally say it and put it into a tool like ChatGPT or Claude. So any AI tools that can help him reword what he was saying and then tell it to help him say it in simple English or in 5th grade English. Any of those two would work quite well. And I told him to also ask it to help him with crafting his introduction himself to other people using metaphors that make it easy for people to understand his research. And when he did that, he commented on how people just seemed to get what he was saying, even though he felt he'd been trying to say the same thing over time. So it was very cool to see how just putting in a bit of effort, understanding, diagnosing what the issues were with communication, and then actually working to do the tweaks that are required in communication, in pronunciation. And the pronunciation does take time. It takes practice. Sometimes you're having to unlearn decades worth of learning in order to replace it with something that is better or more proficient when it comes to your pronunciation. But again, practice makes progress, and you want to go not for perfection, but for the right direction. So yeah, that worked out really well for him. Next up, I'm going to tell you the story of Obed and how we were able to help him. If any of the characters I've mentioned and their stories resonate with you and you're looking to improve your ability to speak in public or communicate in one form or another, you should get in touch. Let's have a conversation to see if there's anything I can do to help you on your journey. I also have systems to help you improve in your content creation so that you can take something that might seem very complex and make it very simple so that you can churn out content as quickly and as efficiently as you'd like to. If that sounds good, click on the link in the comment or description and let's have a conversation. Let's get back to the video. Now let's talk about Obed. Obed was a different character. He didn't necessarily come to me with knowing exactly what his issues were. He just came and said, I need public speaking training. It's important. I'm like, okay, that's fine. What do you need training about? And he's like, I'm not sure, but I just know I need training. I need practice. Okay. So I knew a few things he was up to, but I had to do some more digging to really find out what the issues were and how I could help. First of all, what I knew about him was that he was new to the country. This is Canada. And he felt like he wasn't quite communicating well enough, but he couldn't quite pinpoint or articulate what the issue was. So, in digging deeper, similar to the previous character I mentioned, similar to Kevin, he had found that there were times when people would ask him to repeat himself. Another thing he found was that he could sort of see people lose interest when he spoke, and he couldn't really understand why. Like their eyes would just glaze over and almost like they weren't paying attention or just being polite to stand there, but not necessarily listen to what he said. And I can imagine that was pretty frustrating for him. And he just kept thinking he needs to improve because he does know that in the future, maybe sooner rather than later, he's going to have to do quite a bit of public speaking. This character, Obed, is not just a musician, he's also a pastor, and he also does a lot of things in the e-commerce space for musicians, as well as produces, writes music, helps musicians to push their music out into the world and let their music be heard by the people that they're intending. All of that thing. So he's a real musician's musician. However, he's starting to realize that, okay, he wants to get this public speaking side sorted quite early. That way he wasn't going to run into issues later. And I really commend him for his forward thinking. All right. So I thought, okay, how can I help? There are a few things. If people are asking you to repeat yourself often, it may be something to do with the way you're speaking, maybe potentially your accent, although I don't think that's usually always the case. It could also be maybe you speak too fast or speak very slow, or it could also be maybe the way you pronounce some words, this sort of thing. So the first diagnostic I thought to do for him was pronunciation. So again, similar to Kevin, what I then asked for was for him to read out a few sentences with words laced in there that were words that people often tripped on and maybe mispronounced. But he read through them fine. There weren't many issues. There were maybe one or two things like maybe words he wasn't familiar with, maybe like the CH sound in some words that's pronounced as SH, like sh instead of ch. So there are one or two things like that, but that couldn't be the reason people kept asking him to repeat himself. Okay, we then thought, okay, what else is it? I then realized that when I then told him just talk about something, introduce himself, that's where the issues came. First of all, there were lots of ums and ahs, which are called filler words. Besides that, I also found that he did not exude confidence. He seemed to shrink back even as he spoke. He would say, hi, my name is Obed. And he would just reduce his volume when he spoke a little bit. I was like, oh, what's going on there? And also, he didn't smile as much. Now, if you know Obed, you would recognize him by his smile. He has an amazing smile that just melts people's hearts. But somehow when it comes to speaking to people one-on-one or in a large audience, he sometimes forgets to smile. And I told him, that is one of the tools in your arsenal. Use it. So I said, okay, let's try that again. We're going to introduce yourself, but now I want you to lean in. I want you to maintain eye contact. I literally got two teddy bears and myself, put them at different sides of the room and told him to make sure that he is giving eye contact to each of us. So do a sort of like triangle view so that he could practice that. And that was quite amusing, but it worked out quite well. And I also gave him a sort of script to introduce himself as well. I told him, look, sometimes things just come with practice. Everybody you see online or in person who is able to speak without any filler words and they're able to just communicate very confidently, quite often it's that they've had a lot of practice. So you just need practice because practice makes progress. And we want to go not for perfection, but for direction. All right. So I told him all those things and then we practiced again. And it was amazing to see the energy that came into him, into his body as he just smiled. It was like night and day. That's it. Literally, your smile is your superpower. You mustn't let go of that. So instead, he got to introduce himself. And then we worked on his messaging, the how, the what he says in introducing himself. So we talked about how, which is his gesticulation, making sure he's able to really engage people, making sure he's leaning forward as he's speaking. But we also looked at what exactly he was saying. And we realized that for different audiences, he needed to introduce himself differently. If it was just a general audience, he might mention a few things he does in music. He does a lot in music, but rather than mention everything, he just had to focus on maybe the three most important things and then leave enough room for people to ask more questions if they so desired. If he was speaking to a more general audience or somebody he just met on the street, he might not go into as much detail on his music side, although he would mention it, but he might also talk about maybe his family, his wife, his children. And then when he was obviously introducing himself, let's say he was about to preach or minister somewhere, he needed to have a different way of introducing himself and a different way of entering into the space for him to then deliver. So we worked on those pieces. And for me, it was amazing just seeing the transformation, how he was able to go from shrinking back a little bit when talking, not maintaining eye contact, to really leaning in, smiling a lot more, and just giving it so much energy. I'm still waiting to hear feedback over the next few weeks on how he has found people receive him. But even he feels so much more confident in expressing himself just because he knew what the issues were and where to practice. Those are very important. When you have clarity, you are able to make so much more progress because you're not just feeling in the dark trying to figure out how to make it work. You actually notice what the issues are and work on them, which for him was fantastic. All right, let's move on to our third and final character. Hold on a second. I hope you're enjoying the video so far. If you're finding value in this, go ahead and do the needful, like the like, subscribe, comment. But more importantly, I want you to share this video with somebody who could benefit from it. Somebody who's looking to improve their public speaking communication skills. Somebody who would really value the fact that you looked out for them by sharing this content with them. All right, let's get back in the video. And finally, let's talk about Gabriel. Now, Gabriel is an older gentleman. He works as a realtor. He actually runs a realtor business. Not just that, he's a co-partner on that business. For him, he has recognized that there is an absolute need for him to be on social media as the face of the brand and also to find new clients for his business. However, that's where he struggles. Now, Gabriel is very, very consistent. He literally posts videos every day. So kudos to him because sometimes I struggle with that. But even though he constantly keeps posting, and that's pretty good for building practice, he needs to build practice in the right way. I actually met him at a business meetup, so a networking event. And in there, he mentioned some of the struggles he had. He mentioned that one of his channel viewers told him his videos were boring. Now, the person who told him was pretty blunt but friendly. Just told him, look, your videos are boring. Another person had complained about the sound on his videos. In general, he just needed help. I said, okay, I'll take a look. So I went to his page and looked through his content, and I noticed a few things. First of all, the angle wasn't quite right. So the camera was sort of up above and looking down on him. And he's a tall guy, so it just looked like a very weird angle. Next up, his sound wasn't so great. It sounded very echoey. Also, he wasn't very visible because he was backing the light. So there was a light source behind him. And so his face was sort of dark. So it didn't look as good on that. But those are minor things. Then there were other things as well to do with his way of communicating. It felt like I was watching a news report for realtors. Basically, the language used was just not speaking to me. I didn't understand a lot of the jargon that he used. Also, at the end of watching the video, which I felt the urge to click off many times, but I didn't, I asked myself, okay, what's this guy trying to say, or what's he trying to get me to do? Because it wasn't clear. Also, the delivery of it felt like he was acting in the way he expected to act, maybe when doing a video, but that was just not him. It didn't feel very authentic. And I thought, oh, there's so much you can do here, just a few tweaks here and there that we can work on to make things better. So we started on those. A few things we did. First of all, we fixed his sound and his lighting. It was a simple thing. I gave him a few recommendations, which he got off Amazon, and I'll put a few links in the description for you. He just got a wireless mic, a good wireless mic that worked, not the very cheap ones that sounded like he was going through a tunnel, not those ones, a better one. Then we also looked into his lights. So we got 2 light sources, so big soft boxes that he could then use to really light his face up and make him look well lit and professional. That was 2. 3, we adjusted the height of his camera. So rather than it looking down on him, it was sort of eye level. So it really helped him look like he was engaging with the person he was speaking to at the other end of the lens. Besides that, we then looked at his messaging. What was he actually telling people? And one of the videos he had was a market update. Now, those videos are very useful for realtors. He says, in fact, it's mostly realtors that comment on his videos. Realtors are not the market he's aiming for, though. He's aiming for buyers, first-time buyers, people upgrading their property, people looking to sell the property, maybe even property investors, not other real estate professionals. So something's wrong with his messaging there. And what we found out was because he was using a lot of jargon, it cut out everybody who didn't understand the jargon, and it didn't give them a chance to actually engage with his content. Besides that, there's also the fact that his content didn't quite tell what the next step was or what the message was. So, for example, there was something said like, oh, time on market has gone up to 45. What does that mean to the average person? What he could have said was, properties are staying longer on the market, which means that if you're a seller, it might take you longer to sell your property. Okay, that makes sense. I understand that as a seller. The next step up from that would then be what to do right now. Is it still a good time to sell, or should I just hold off and then sell later? Those are the kinds of insights that we'd want to actually see from his videos. But another thing I found with him was he didn't appear authentic when he was delivering the video. And I could hazard a guess why. He was reading off a teleprompter. Now, teleprompters are good for making sure that you can say things exactly as you need to say them, and you can still be looking at the lens when you're doing that. But if you are not used to using a teleprompter, it can be very obvious that you are using a teleprompter, and it can come across as being inauthentic. You're not even talking the way you would normally talk. You're talking like you're literally reading off a screen, and that wasn't doing him any favors. So I did tell him, okay, try not to use a teleprompter. I know it's difficult, but you're going to have to let go and maybe move towards bullet points and having genuine conversations, explaining things to the people who you're looking to reach out to. He also mentioned that he's looking to check out other formats. So, for example, a podcast format. And I think that would work better for him because he's the sort of person who is like your real estate buddy. He's there to really explain things to you. And even if you are a potential buyer or seller or investor, if he doesn't think you buying the property would make sense for you in the long run, he'll tell you he'd rather you get a property that you love as opposed to getting a property that maybe you get at a good price, but then comes with a lot of issues later on. Even though he would have made the sale, he knows that it's better in the long run to help you get a property that you love. And I like that about him. He's able to really help people when he's in person. But when it comes to the camera and the camera comes on, it's like his personality goes out the window and it's a lot more robotic and not just very engaging. So there was a lot we had to fix there. And it's still a work in progress. Even changes to do with your public speaking, your communicating with people. It's an art, not necessarily a science. There are some things that can be fixed. Tick boxes, for example, like the tech gear that I mentioned, he had to fix. Besides that, there's also just constantly learning. I keep working with him. We're learning, but so far he's already received a lot of good feedback. Literally the day after he got the new microphone, somebody commented, "Your audio sounds so much better and less echoey." He's like, "I didn't even realize there was echo, but your audience did." And that's what's important in this case. Also, he's now better lit. His angles are better. Now we just need to work on that messaging such that people understand what he's trying to say in his videos and they're able to take action. They know what the next action is. And he comes across more authentic, like he does in person. That's what we're working on. Thanks for taking the time to watch this, and well done for investing in your own public speaking skills by watching this video. Remember this, whether you're struggling with your accent, wanting to be taken more seriously, or wanting to better connect with your audience, progress can always be made. It's not about perfection. It's about going in the right direction, one step at a time. Now, I'd love for you to do one last thing. Let me know in the comments what in this video resonated with you. Did you see yourself in Obed, in Kevin, or in Gabriel? Let me know in the comments. Or what have your struggles with public speaking been? And can you share it with us? Let's learn from each other. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. I'll be in the comments responding to all of them, so please go ahead. I'm waiting for you. And in the meantime, like I mentioned before, don't forget to share it with somebody. But also, if you are somebody looking to improve on your communication skills and you'd like my help, go ahead, click on the link below. It will take you to a page where you can either book a meeting with me or leave me a message and we can start the ball rolling that way. Go ahead. I'm looking forward to hearing from you. In the meantime, check out the video that appears on your screen. I'm sure you'll enjoy it.